All right. So, hi everyone. Very good evening. We have a special guest, Aditya Thakur, who is going to speak about Flutter now, and you will be able to go ahead with the Flutter with your journey as a developer. Apart from that, I will like to introduce about Aditya, what he has done earlier and what he is doing now, and what he will guide you in next 1 hour. So, Aditya is a Flutter developer and already working as a developer advocate at, and apart from that, he's being a good speaker at various places. When you talk about today only, he has back to back 2 sessions, and he has, I guess, uh, hosted various session previously as well in various places as like hackathons, and some GDG also, I guess. He has hosted sessions like on Flutter. So, not wasting much time, we'll begin with the Aditya. And Aditya, if you want to introduce yourself in your way, you can also. Otherwise, you can go ahead with the session as well. It's up to you. So, welcome Aditya
Uh,
in the
yeah,
session.
awesome. Thank you so much. Really excited to be here. I'll share my presentation because I have an introduction there, so I'll come back to that. But thank you so much for having me. Today, we'll again be talking about Flutter throughout this session, and I want to make it really simple for you to, get started with Flutter, and later on maybe go out there and develop your applications. So, introduction about me. I currently work as developer advocate at 100ms. I've been an open source contributor to the Flutter Plus plugins and the Flutterfire official repository. Other than that, I continue to speak at events. As mentioned, like I have a few events scheduled for today, and I have previously been a speaker at Flutter Vikings. It's a very big Nordic conference. There's Flutter Global Summit I recently spoke at in the senior track. And other than that, I have a community of Flutter devs where we talk about Flutter development. And I also make YouTube videos where I'm close to 8,000 subscribers right now. So before diving right into Flutter, I want to quickly focus on why mobile development. Uh, if you have a mobile device, chances are that a lot of the time that you spend on your mobile phone is generally in apps. So these apps could be social applications like Instagram, or you could be watching videos on YouTube. So a large part of the time that you spend on your mobile phone is generally like using these applications on your phone instead of using like a Chrome or web browser, unless you have to like search or maybe read a news article or something. But most of the other time you're generally on your phone on a application. And when it comes to developing these applications, there are generally two frameworks that you can go for. So there's Android. A lot of people in India have Android devices, but there is also a large population of users who have an iOS device. So when it came to developing applications, like when I first thought ki I wanted to build these applications, I initially started out with Android. And before I go into that journey, if you can quickly comment down what operating system uh, do you have on your mobile device, that would be really cool. So if you are an Android user, you can write down Android, and if you are an iOS user, you can type in iOS there. So I decided, this was 2 years back, that I want to build application, put them on Play Store. The first tech stack or the first idea that came to my mind when thinking of building these applications was I would go ahead with Java. So I knew Java programming language. I thought I would go ahead, download Android Studio, write some code in Java, and ship my application to Play Store. The only problem with this whole strategy was a lot of my friends back in college had iOS devices, and when they published the application on Play Store, they would not be able to use that. And I want them to be able to download it to iPhone as well, maybe give it a shot and try it out. And there was also other factors involved, as in I also wanted for my application to have like maybe a landing page and web development. I didn't start out with web development, so it seemed far-fetched then to learn three different tech stacks to just build one application. So this is where Flutter came in for me. Like, this is where Flutter satisfied the use case I had. So six problems, one solution, that is unofficial tagline that I have for it. What Flutter does basically is, if you are building applications, if you want your applications to be built for mobile, you can use Flutter. If you want to instead build apps for web, you can still use Flutter. And if you want to build applications for desktop, you can again use Flutter. It right now caters to these six different operating systems, which simply means using one single code base, you can run your application on these six operating systems. So there is Windows, Mac OS, Linux that come under desktop. Then there's web. You can build web applications with Flutter. And lastly, there's iOS and Android. So these are two mobile operating systems that you can build application for. Very simply put, you write code once and it would run both on iOS and Android. So that is a very big developer advantage. Instead of having to maintain two separate teams, you can have just one team build applications for these two different operating systems. So Flutter not only runs on these like operating system, it can also be used on embedded devices. And beyond that, this is like a very cool example built by one of the Google developer expert. So what he did was he actually used a LCD device he purchased of I think Alibaba, and then he built his Flutter application to run on it. And since this is like a ID card built, so people at the conference can interact with it. It's also touchable. There is a whole video. I didn't put in the video, but if you feel if you like want to check it out, you can go over to his username and check out this video of him building this complete ID card, which is like very interactive and it runs using Flutter. But there are also other examples where Flutter has astonished a lot of the folks. You can also run Flutter apps on Wear OS. So if you have a watch that runs Wear OS, you can run your Flutter application, and you can even build games to run on your watch using Flutter and the Flame engine. But we'll talk about these in depth. We'll talk about how Flutter works, how can you get started writing code. I also have a small crash course to give you like an overview, so that when you after this session go ahead and try to set it up and run your first application, you'll have like a brief idea of what is going on inside the code. So again, to iterate on the features really quickly, high velocity of development. When you're writing code in Flutter, you'll feel that advantage there, where you can quickly see changes on your screen. So you have like high velocity development. As you write code, you can see changes on screen. A very expressive and flexible toolkit. Since Flutter is like front end framework, you can do a lot of things. You can create visual UIs, you can control every pixel on screen, and it is a very big advantage. And lastly, this is to answer your questions around if I build for two platforms, would they feel good? So Flutter has a very native iOS and Android experience, so your end users will not know the difference if it's like a native app or Flutter app. um, Lastly, going over to how you create a Flutter project. So the command to run is Flutter create new app. But quickly talking about what all do you need. So if you go over to flutter.dev, which is like the official website, uh, on this website you'll have a button called get started. So this is where, when you are starting out with Flutter, this is where you go to. Now from here you need to install the SDK. Depending on the operating system you have, like let us say you have a Windows operating system, you can go down to the installation, check out the steps here, download the Flutter SDK as a zip, and you'll have to install it or extract it, and then set up your path. And there is like a process involved. And then lastly, you can set up a ID. So for Flutter development, you can either use Android Studio as your IDE, or you can also use VS Code. So if you're like have been using VS Code and you prefer that, you can use VS Code for developing apps with Flutter. That wouldn't be a problem. Although if you are like a beginner, I would recommend downloading Android Studio and setting that up, because it's like really easy, especially if you are like on Windows. You want to also set up an emulator, so Android Studio would be a better choice to go with. And after you're done setting it up, also like if you have problem in reading through the documentation and setting it on your own, I would recommend watching like a latest video on how to install Flutter for your operating system, because that would cover everything. So you can quickly go ahead and set up everything so you don't have any problems. So we'll come back to the presentation. We have something called Flutter create a new app. Once Flutter is set up, you can like open up a terminal and navigate to a folder. I'll go ahead and go over to my desktop just to show you what happens when you create a new application. So once Flutter is set up, I believe if you run the Flutter command, you will have like different options here. So it would show you some of these options. It might take some time to run. uh, what we'll do is use this Flutter create command to set up like a new project. So I'm typing in Flutter and then I'm typing in create, and lastly I have the name of the project. So if you want to call it something else, if you have like a idea in mind, you want to build it using Flutter, the name of that project would go here, and then you can run this command. This should take some time to run. If like your device is faster, this should go and happen faster. I have a new version update available for Flutter. I would download it after some time, after the session maybe. And once this command runs, what it would do is it would write some files for you. And if you have noticed, like there is a new folder appearing here on my desktop, I can quickly open this folder in VS Code. I use VS Code on my Mac to run Flutter projects. So I'll quickly open it from desktop, open the project that I just created, and show you the project structure of a new Flutter app. So Flutter apps, when you create them using Flutter create command, come for 6 operating systems. So if you can see, there's a web folder right here. There's also a Mac OS folder, a Linux folder, a iOS folder, and an Android folder. The Windows folder is missing because this is a Mac device, but like the 5 operating systems are here, 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 5. So these 5 operating systems you can still build on your application. They would run just fine. Now, how writing code in Flutter works. So quickly talking about that, when you are a Flutter developer, the code that you write generally goes inside a folder called lib. So if you can see, this is a lib folder. All your um, code would be written in a programming language called Dart. So Dart programming language is very familiar to how Java looks like. If you have worked with it, since I initially knew Java, moving from that to Dart was really easy for me. So to get a hold of how Dart works, you can go over to dart.dev, and if you'll go down to documentation of Dart, there is something called a language tour here. So a tour of the Dart language. And if you like come here once, you can see like the basic Dart program is mentioned here. So you can like notice how print statement works. So this is very similar to how print is written in Python. Print and the string that you want to show on the terminal, you can pass it to this function, and then it would print it out. More than that, on this particular documentation page, there are other things such as what all build types are available in Dart, how do you define a function, and how do you write like a class, or even things such as how do you do control flow statements like if and else in Dart. So generally, if you are a student who wants to learn Flutter development, if you take up a course, they all cover Dart development from scratch, so you don't have to worry about learning Dart externally. But if you want to get a quick overview of how Dart works, or have a brief of like the Dart programming language, you can always visit this page. This is like my favorite page of the documentation where you find everything. So you can learn everything about Dart here. Quickly check it out, quickly see the examples, and you'll understand a lot of things. So coming back to my Flutter project, it might not make sense initially. There are like a lot of comments here in this project. This is by the Flutter team, like a basic example. But what I want to convey is all the code that you would write would go inside this lib folder. You can create like multiple Dart files here and write code in it. And once you have written this code, once you try running it, it will go over to the Flutter engine and it will render it on the different operating systems. So it will show like an Android app when you run it on for Android, and it will also show like a iOS app. Like the same code would both run on Android and iOS. So you can make changes to one file and you will have like those changes appear on both of the screens. uh, if you want to, like, later on when you're working on more advanced projects, if you want to make some changes to Android, like maybe add some permissions. Since I work with the live audio video SDK company, we build applications that, use camera and microphone, like in this session. So I want to add some permissions. I can always go down to this Android directory and, maybe set up some permissions in the manifest. So if I go over to source main, you'll have like a Android manifest .xml, and you can make changes here. You can modify this file, add some lines of permissions, and, the project would work just fine. Like, you can make these Android level changes, and they would work. So I get this question a lot when I do first beginner sessions. Like, would be able to, add permissions to Android, or everything goes in main.dart. You can do those changes. You can modify the manifest to have those permissions, and your project would work like fine if you're running it on Android. It will have those camera and microphone permissions. You can request them using Dart code, and that would work just okay. So that this was like a demo of this Flutter project. And what I'll also do is I'll open this tab here and also run an emulator for you to see. So I'll run it on Pixel. So while this launches, like, this should uh, take some time to run. So I'll just quickly launch this project and come back to my presentation to give you a Flutter crash course. So this Flutter crash course is meant to help you visualize of how, writing code in Flutter would work. Quickly going through it, everything in Flutter is a widget. Now you can think of these widgets as Lego blocks. Let us say you want to add some element on screen. So you have your, base base widget, or, base screen, empty screen, and you put one block on top. It would show something like maybe a text, and then you go on putting other blocks like maybe an image and other such things. And that is how Flutter apps are built. So imagine you are a mobile developer. Imagine, you started out with the company as a Flutter intern. This would be your canvas. So this empty mobile screen is your canvas. And now you want to show something on screen. Let us say your manager tells you to add some text. Now, how would that look like in Flutter? So in Flutter, what we use is called the text widget. So you type in text, then you open these round brackets, and then you pass it a value to it. So text is like a class, and, you can think of its constructor something like with string data. So it takes in some data as, the value that you want to show on screen. So you type in text, you pass in the value that you want to show, and it will show that on screen. So Flutter would take that Dart code and, render it on your Android application. Now the visual things might vary. So this is not how it would look like when you do it the first time, but after adding some styles and everything, this is how it would look like. But the base, the text widget would be something like this. So you type in text, you tell it the value you want to pass to it, and it will show that on screen. So let us try this out for an image now. Let's say the same manager comes and tells you, like, I want an image just under it. How would you do that? If anyone wants to guess that, please write it down in the comments. uh, how do you think, like, we typed in text and we told it what to show? How would it look like for an image? So it would again look very similar. You type in image, and you then tell it like what to show. So in our case, we are using like a network image. So we have to pass in a URL. This image would come from a URL, and then it will Flutter would take it and show it on screen. So that is the concept of widgets. We have multiple widgets in Flutter that you can use to build your application out. And again, before I come to this, really quickly want to talk about, you do not have to learn all these widgets. So let's just come back to our presentation, come out of this presentation and go over to the documentation itself. So I talked about the flutter.dev website, or the web page. Now again, here on the same web page, you can go over to documentation or docs, and just under it, under the Flutter documentation, you'll find something called a widgets catalog. So you again don't have to learn all the widgets that are out there. You can quickly go over to this widgets catalog and find the widgets that you want to use. So if you remember, we talked about text. Text widget is available in different, different things that you can use to display text. We talked about the basic text widget, which looks like this. So you type in text and tell it the value that you want to show. Hello Ruth, how are you? And it will show that on screen. And you can add some styles to maybe modify how it looks like, something how CSS works if you are from web development. But we also have other widgets. So we talked about images as well. You can find it just under here. So if you want to show an image on screen, like the one that is here that we were also using in our example, you can type in image and then pass it the image that you want to show on screen. So there would be like a URL that comes from GitHub, and it shows this image inside your application. Coming just a bit back, there are also other widgets that you can use. There are something called layout widgets. So we'll also talk about this. Layout widgets help you align other widgets on screen. So let us say you wanted the text not like at the top somewhere else on screen, so layout widgets can be used to do that. And there are also other widgets that help you do like multiple things, like maybe a transform widget and a size box that you can add to add some empty space. So coming to this presentation, what we have here is like the WhatsApp familiar UI. WhatsApp is like the common messaging app, so this might be a familiar UI for you. So if as a Flutter developer you are told, I want this to be built, there are a few steps that we would do. First step would be breaking down this UI. So as a mobile developer, what I would see is like there's a app bar on top, and then we also have this tab changing feature. But since like we're talking about beginner Flutter developer, we'll look at the bottom UI. And what you will notice is like this is also a combination of these blocks. So if you'll see, like the same blocks are repeating one over the other. We have a round image, and then we have like some text in front of it, and this keeps on repeating. So as a Flutter developer, you'll gauge like maybe this is a list, same widgets being repeated over time, and you can align them vertically. And we also have a floating action button that lets you create a new chart. Again, in Flutter there are some widgets that have only one child. So if you're like aligning widgets, I talked about the blank Flutter example, so where you have a blank screen and then you can put a widget on top of it. So some widgets only allow one child to be there, so you can only put one widget on top of it. But there are also some widgets that allow you to have like multiple children. So you can think of it as a tree. You have your parent widget, and then it can have either one child or it can have like multiple children, more than one. And column is one such widget that allows you to have like multiple things shown on screen. So it takes in a list of these widgets. Let us say we wanted to show like three different text on screen in this vertical fashion, like Flutter crash course. So you can put them in like this text that we talked about earlier and pass in the value that you want to show, and all these different text widgets would be inside this list, and they can be shown on screen in this particular fashion. So this is how layout widgets work. So we talked about some UI widgets like image and text that were showing up something on screen. And then we can also lay them out on how we would like to be, how we want them to be seen on screen, and that is where column comes in. So it helps you lay out these widgets on screen like in a vertical fashion. There is also one widget called row that you can use to lay them out horizontally instead. So with this example done, like to come to the summary of it, widgets are again building blocks. You can think of them as Lego. You want to show something on screen, you use a widget, and we write the name of the widget and specify in front of it the property that we want to use. You don't have to again learn all these widgets. This link flutter.dev-widgets has a catalog of these commonly used widgets that I also showed you here. So you can always refer it to like get what widgets to use, you can find them under each of these headers. And also there is a very nice playlist on the flutter.dev channel, which is widgets of the week. So every week you can check out a new widget, what it does, how it can be used inside your application. And this has helped me a lot of the times, because by checking out this playlist, I get to know of all the widgets that I can use, which I otherwise wouldn't know. So even as a Flutter developer right now, there is always something to learn. And with this done, before I move on over to my presentation, coming back to the project that we left running. So when you first time run a Flutter project, this is the default application that you get. This is a very simple application. You click on this floating action button, and then it increments the counter on screen by 1. So you click on this and the number would change. There is some text being shown on screen. There is a title to this page. So you can find this title property here. And what I can do is I can quickly change it to getting started with Flutter. And you'll notice like this file is right now unsaved, but as soon as I save it, and I can make these changes reloaded on the screen. So I'll quickly reload these changes. Is my app not connected? Okay, so let us instead try it out with this text. I don't know why that wasn't loading up. Flutter, sorry, getting started with Flutter. So once I save this file, you'll see like the text on the screen immediately change. With this, you can quickly see the changes on screen. So even if you add like another widget down here, maybe another text that you want to say something inside is like Flutter crash course. And as soon as you are done writing this code, so I'll also zoom in a bit so it's better visible. So as soon as I add a text, open the brackets and pass in a value, my file is unsaved right now. As I save it, you'll see like a small another text appear right here. So as you're developing your application, this becomes very handy. So you can quickly add your widgets, quickly see how they look like on the user application. And you can also fix some changes, like maybe if there is a typo that you have, you can quickly see it instead of having to run your application from scratch every time. So this is called a hot reload, the one that I was doing. And I can also restart this application. So if I kill this, I am starting it from scratch, but I can also, if I want to restart it, I can quickly restart it using this green icon here. So as you're developing Flutter applications, you'll get more familiar with it. There are a lot of things before this code looks familiar. uh, okay, this is only the title. I'm sorry, I was trying to change it. That is why the changes are not visible, because this is only the title of the material app. I should have been passing the title here, and with that you can see the app bar title change, something I got stuck in. And that also happened with the hot reload itself. I didn't have to start the application. So uh, what I wanted to convey with this particular example is how quickly you can see changes, and this adds a lot to the developer experience. This particular title here inside the material app is only of the material app as a whole that you have. You can give it a title so that for anyone who is running this project, it is easier to understand. By passing a title value here, what I'm doing is I'm actually changing this particular app bar text, because from here this title is being sent down to this app bar property. So this will make sense once you get more familiar with the code base. And what we'll do is we'll come back to the presentation again quickly. We have already talked about this a lot. Widgets form these building blocks. Whatever changes I was doing was happening inside a widget that was responsible for some part of the screen. And you can quickly see these changes by using hot reload, which adds to the developer experience. you don't have to learn all the widgets. You can always visit the widgets catalog. You can maybe look up videos put out by the Flutter dev team to familiarize yourself with it. By the end of this, like close to the end of this particular session, we'll also talk about some courses that you can take up. But quickly coming back to why Flutter is what it is today. Flutter is a very young framework. When I first started with it, there weren't a lot of people, who knew about it or actually worked with it. But ever since the community has grown, a lot of folks have put out their courses on Flutter development to help beginners like you. There are people writing articles. There are people now actually using it to build their, production level applications. And the best part of Flutter has been the community. So if you choose to go ahead, start with Flutter, there are a lot of people who would help you. This right here is a picture with some GDs that I met at Flutter Conference India. Actually, all of them are from Flutter Conf India. This was one with the organizing team. And we also had our Discord meetup. So a few mentors from our Discord joined us for lunch that day, just after the conference. And we also have a lot of people from the international community, like there's Majid, who uh, does a lot for the Flutter uh, people out there. So if you decide to go ahead with Flutter today, I would recommend also maybe joining Twitter or LinkedIn. Most of the Flutter folks are there on Twitter, so you can always talk to senior developers. You can talk to package managers directly, tweet them out, and they would be happy to help. They generally answer questions. There are a lot of brainstorming threads out there on Twitter. So if like somebody asks questions, there are folks from the community who are replying to it and having a discussion there. It generally helps knowing that you aren't the only one who is trying to develop applications in Flutter. Talking about things back home, a big example of some of the big applications built using Flutter is Zerodha. So Zerodha's Kite app is right now built in Flutter. Even the Google Pay app that you use is written in Flutter. If you have used like Google Classroom, it's also built using Flutter. Some part of the PUBG game, like PUBG was a lot popular when I was in school, but some part of one module, uh, the module related to community on PUBG is actually built using Flutter. So there's a video about it on the Flutter official channel itself. The problem again, there is a very good case study that Zerodha has written. They started out initially building their native Android application, but soon they realized that there are also iOS users who want to use their application. The first choice of cross-platform development for them was React Native, because JS is very old JavaScript, and then React is like the go-to framework for a lot of web developers. They went ahead and chose React Native to develop application for Android and iOS. But according to their piece, I think the Android build wasn't stable, and Flutter back then was only in beta, but they still decided to go ahead and try it out, and they have been using it since. So right now Zerodha has over 2000 crore in profit. A lot of users use it daily to mark their trades, handle their money. And I think it's like a very good example of how you can still use Flutter apps in production at scale. There are other startups like Zest Money that have their applications built in Flutter. Lately, I've been seeing Tata TCS hiring a lot of Flutter developers. There are companies like Tata Digital, which have been using Flutter right now. Not really sure about that, but all this has been, being in the community. I see some folks get hired somewhere, and then we tend to assume like they are going ahead with Flutter. But Zerodha has their article. You can check that out. There are a lot more other startups that use Flutter. If you have seen Shark Tank recently, a lot of companies have mentioned their tech stack being, the applications being built with Flutter. One such company was Stage.in. So this is like a simplified comparison, but I wouldn't focus on it because it's a bit outdated right now. But again, with Flutter, it's not about building for these six different platforms. So when people start out, they are like, no, I'll go ahead and build for all the six different platforms one application. But it's not about building for those. You can use it for mobile like Android and iOS, or if you are like want to build the same experience on web as well. What would happen is with Flutter, the underlying business logic can remain same across applications. So this is a very big advantage. Let us say you build an application to add two numbers, so the function that does the sum would remain same across platforms, and you can adapt the UI based on the operating system. So let us say you're building for web, you might need a responsive application that looks certain way on mobile, and when expand it, it looks bigger. So you have that advantage with Flutter. You wouldn't have to do the business logic part again when you're building applications for multiple platforms. That is the bigger advantage here. It helps developers a lot. It helps people like write less code, and be more productive with it. This right here is like the architecture of how Flutter is. We have our framework Dart, we have our engine, Skia, Dart, and text. In Flutter, like the latest Flutter forward announcements, Impeller is the new engine that the Flutter team is working on, and it's available to try out for iOS in beta channel, I think. But Skia was the previous rendering engine that Flutter used. What Flutter does is it uses method channels to interact with the Android and iOS side of things, and you can dive into this architecture deep. There's a documentation available on it on the flutter.dev website if you choose to. So when you're first starting out with Flutter, I'll recommend you spend some time building UI clones. Why is that? Because Flutter is a front end framework. If you know how to have your widgets placed across screen, if you have that control, it would help you overall in your Flutter development journey. So start out by building some UI clones. Try to take some popular app, maybe Instagram or such. Try to replicate it in Flutter, and you'll know how to place the different widgets on screen. Once you're familiar with that, maybe go ahead, try building a music player, because it would tell you about how you can use local files on device, and how you can maybe also play out audio by using your mobile application. Then, as a Flutter developer, if you're also looking for internships and such, I would recommend having knowledge of how to work with APIs, because generally when you're working on a production level app, you have to get data from somewhere, maybe by through a database, or through an API. This would help you learn how parsing is done, how data is parsed, how requests are made, and like a news app would also help you with tags. You can filter out what you want to show depending on the tag. Take up a database after you are familiar with working with the APIs. Learn out crude operations, how to create, read, update, or delete, maybe manage storage. And with Firebase you have all these other features to try out in Flutter, like remote config, analytics, etc. So there are a lot of database options available. You can use like Firebase. It has the simplest integration with Flutter. You can simply run a CLI command, and you can link your Firebase project with your Flutter application. There are other open source alternatives like Superbase AppWrite to try out. You can use your custom backend with Flutter, like maybe built out in Node.js, and you can use it in Flutter application. And we also have local databases like SQLite. And once you do that, you'll have to learn something called state management in Flutter. So you want to manage your data inside your application, and this can be done using a package provided by the community like Riverpod block. And you can learn state management to make your applications much better in how they handle data. You can show changes in the UI when some data changes. If you're able to successfully get some data, you can show a certain screen, and that would like make your apps better. Lastly, I would recommend try building out like an e-commerce application, because one, there would be state management. You have to like manage the cart when somebody's adding something to it. You'll have to manage your data inside the application. Second, you'll also learn about payment integration. So there are a lot of things available to enable payments in a Flutter app. There's also a GPay package, so you can use Google Pay inside your Flutter applications. And I've also heard from like a lot of Flutter developers, the journal request that they get is to build an e-commerce app. So having a template of it while you're learning Flutter would help you like later on get a freelancing opportunity. You'll already have a e-commerce app, you can modify it to the requirements, and work as a freelancer for a bit. And then you can go on build a game in Flutter. It would teach you about animations, how physics and motion is done. With Flutter pushing like game development, I think it would be a good time to experiment with it. Maybe use Flame Engine to build your applications or build a game in Flutter. Lastly, we come to this part where you have started out with Flutter development. You are learning through online course or like a Udemy course maybe, and then you have started building out your projects. What I would recommend you is like during that period while you're building your projects, to also share your learnings and learn in public, build in public, like share your projects, what you're working on. Maybe take a video of the application that is running and put it out on your LinkedIn profile. And this would help you like connect with folks one in Flutter development, and maybe if they are hiring, this would work as your digital resume that would help you find your internships or like first role in Flutter development. How I found my first role was, there was this startup that wanted to build application in Flutter, so I reached out to the founder and he offered me the role. I worked for them I think for a month, and then I switched to a different company where I worked as a Flutter intern. So the first role that I took up was even before I had learned about, even before I had completed the course that I was taking up, which I wouldn't recommend, like unless you feel you are ready. But I took up that role and I didn't know about responsive design. So I learned a lot on my job. Like while I was working on that application, my mentor or the person that who was leading the project would ask me to make something responsive, and then I had to Google it, look up videos and how to do that. So that was a very huge learning curve. Since work was involved, I was also more dedicated towards it. The second part of this question is like what companies hire. Generally, you when you're starting out, you can find roles in startups, but there are more established startups that hire for Flutter developers. Even companies like TCS have been posting a lot of roles with for Flutter, so you can get hired in one of that once you have like a good profile or once you have done enough projects. And then, is it feasible to work full time as a Flutter developer? Yes, a lot of my friends work as Flutter developers. There's a video on my YouTube channel on road to being a full time Flutter developer, where I have talked to people who work in these big startups, and the pay is almost similar to how much uh, another software developer engineer at the same stage would be paid. So you don't have to worry about you know if it's feasible or not. There are a lot of people doing it. There are a lot of good devs in mobile development. So as long as you are able to show your work, you'll be paid the same as any other software development engineer. Coming to the end of this session, what are some of the Flutter courses that you can take up? So there is this Notion doc that I prepared on go.learnflutter.in, and you can go over to it, find some free courses on YouTube. So there's one course by Vandad which is like completely available on YouTube for free. You can check it out. 36 hours of Flutter development that would take you from like a beginner to a complete pro in Flutter. And then you can always take up project based learning. So you can maybe build a Instagram clone, or like build one of these applications to get your hand into Flutter development, and it would teach you like it would give you a project by the end of it, but you'll also learn how different things work after like you have a brief overview of how things are written in Flutter. So it's all widgets. You work with those and you build out your application. So, with that said, I'll come to the end of this session. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Maybe in chat, I'll take them up. And yeah, that would be it. So, thank you so much.
Oh, me, Adit, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, you're audible.
That's great. So it's really a great interaction, and whatever you have shared is really a great learning for all of us, especially for me as well. Like I'm not aware about the Flutter, and but I got to know more about it as a crash course as you shared. I will surely share to all my community and friends as well whatever you have shared in 1 hour. It's really great for beginners to understand and motivate themselves to go in a good way to understand and learn Flutter, and
Thank you
hope you
so
will
much.
also help in more way. I will share your YouTube URL as well, as you are a good hosting most of the things in Flutter in your YouTube as well. So I will share your YouTube as well so that my GDSC community can learn in a better way, right?
Thanks so much.
Thanks
Yeah.
a lot, Aditya. It's really a great interaction. I guess we have some question before ending. I guess if you can answer, that will be great.
Yeah.
Just a second. First question is, does Flutter come with a framework?
Like Flutter itself is a framework to build applications in. It is a front end framework. So largely what it does is you write your code in Dart again, and the Flutter engine takes it and converts it to Android or iOS side of things. So yeah.
Okay, that's great. One more question is there, like, does Flutter with any editors or IDs?
Definitely you can use. Generally, what I recommend is Android Studio. If you are working on Windows, it's an easier setup, I feel. But you can use either Android Studio or VS Code. So if you are like a seasoned developer who prefers VS Code, you can always use that for your Flutter applications.
All right. So can you also tell what technology and languages Flutter uh, capable with or built with?
Flutter uses Dart programming language. So Dart is a very powerful client-side optimized programming language. There is actually a talk on how Dart can also be used with Angular to build web apps. But for Flutter applications, like you learn Dart, you write code in it, and that is it.
All right. Uh, Last question. How does Flutter run your code in iOS? How? There is a reason they want to know.
How like from the architecture side of things, what it uses is something called method channels. So if you have like a Windows device, you can't run a iOS application, but to run to run your Flutter app on iOS, you'll need like a Mac OS. So I have a Mac device right here. What I can do is I can quickly instead of running like a Android emulator that I did, I can also launch an iOS emulator. So if I run the project, the process would be similar. I'll click on run, it would run it. Flutter would internally take the Dart code, run it through the method channels, and it would run that as an iOS app that would first install on my simulator, and it would show the end application. So, yeah.
That's really great. So we are end up with the question as well. But yeah, you really answered well, and I hope the answer has been clear to you as well, audience. Thanks again, Aditya, for hosting this session. It's really nice interacting with you and hosting you as a speaker, as a team speaker for us. So we'll get back to you if we have plan more session on Flutter in future. And you
Awesome.
want to
Thank you
you
so much.
say something about our community, how they can improve their learning on Flutter?
Yeah, I think lovely experience here. I would just say, like, if even after this session, if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me, especially if it's with Flutter. And if you like choose to go ahead with Flutter development, if you build out your projects, maybe tag me. I can help you with opportunities when it comes to finding a first role in Flutter. So yeah, that would be it. Really grateful to you, Aman, for having me today and the team. Thanks so much.
Thanks again, Aditya. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.